Hey, you guys are watching Bird Up, the worst show on television.
22 A Million by Bon Iver is my favourite album from 2016, and there is a whole load of shit in this album I could pick out to discuss. Originally I was going to make a full album review for it, but instead I've decided to make a few videos talking more in depth about certain aspects of it, since there's a lot of details that would be missed if I made a full, vague album review, stuff which is a bit more interesting, I feel. So the first thing I want to talk about is how Justin uses an entire spectrum of samples, textures and recording methods in the space of one song and how they all interact with each other. In the song 33 God, the fourth song from the album, there are samples from at least 5 different songs, as well as an incredible amount of very different sounds and instruments, which somehow all fit together. So at the beginning of the song, it starts very minimally, with just a close recording of quite an old-sounding piano. Not much reverb or anything, it's pretty dry. At around 5 seconds in, another recording starts playing on top of the piano, which is just the sound of someone moving around in a room, but actually it's the beginning of another sample. It's a sample of a flute that starts playing at 9 seconds in. This flute sounds like it was recorded from a distance in some kind of hallway or stairwell or something, due to the amount of reverb on it and the fact that it sounds kind of drowned out by the reverb. At 12 seconds, the flute sample and its reverb get totally cut off and it's interrupted by a sample of strings. This sample is from the song Morning by Jim Ed Brown, which originally sounds like this.
Here in this room, this narrow room, where life began when we were young.
And this is how it sounds in the song. In the song, it's been pitched up 7 semitones to fit the key, and it has a little bit of reverb on it. Samples from different parts of this song are used throughout the track, sometimes just strings, sometimes with vocals as well, and they're all pitched up 7 semitones with the same reverb on them. So far the piano has been the main focus of the song. It's been stable in the background with the flute and the samples from Morning laid on top of it, and this carries on until around 23 seconds when a new sample fades in. Now, this sample is super different to everything we've heard thus far. It's a chopped up, very digital sounding woman's voice, which is very stereo. Different sounds pan left and right. It sounds so different from everything else because of how dry and choppy, and also how rhythmically solid it is compared to the strings and flute samples, which are a lot looser and have a bit more reverb on them. This makes it different enough to cut through the mix while it's still being in the background. So at 28 seconds, the flute and strings and everything have dropped out, and only the piano and the chopped vocals are left, and this creates room for the main vocals to come in. So Justin sings for 2 bars, and then pauses for bars 3 and 4, where another sample from Morning plays with strings and vocals. This 4-bar pattern then repeats with 2 bars of vocals and then a Morning sample in the gap. For the third vocal phrase here, there are 2 banjo tracks added, both very quiet, 1 pan left and 1 pan right. These basically layer the piano track with extra melodic and harmonic stuff. There's also a harmonization of the vocals for the first time in the track here. Now these don't sound like the vocal harmonization effects like the ones used elsewhere in the album, such as in Creeks.
Down along the creek, I remember something.
Instead it's just traditionally done recording a second vocal take, then layering the 2. So at 1:10, a pre-chorus section starts, and there's a few new things going on here. First of all, there's a sample from Paolo Nutini's Iron Sky with the lyrics "Find God and Religions." This is the original sample.
We find God and religions.
And this is it in 33 God. It has some distortion, reverb, and it sounds like there's no background music in the sample, so either he processed it really heavily or he has the a cappella. Underneath this, there's some really, really heavily distorted and clipping, very choppy drums with a little more reverb on them. There's still piano in this section, but it sounds like it's been replaced with a different recording, which is a lot more duller, and it sounds like it's like only the wet signal of a reverb, and it has a sense of distance to it. The last layer of sound in this section is what sounds like a kind of post-rock guitar, which has a bunch of delay and reverb on it to the point where it's almost feedbacking with itself. This creates kind of a pad sound which fills in the empty space left by the lack of other instruments here. There's a couple of short vocal sounds here as well, which sound almost like a female announcer for a train station or something, but that might just be because of the amount of reverb on them. All these things together in the pre-chorus come together to form a texture which is really gritty and distorted and washed out in reverb. So it's kind of like ambient industrial music, for lack of a better term. Okay, so at 1:23 we get the quote-unquote chorus section. This is, again, completely different to everything we've heard so far. Most of the vocals here are all harmonised, making them sound a lot thicker than in the verses, and they cut through the really dense instrumentation beneath them really well.
Stayed at the Ace Hotel, the call were loud. I would just be floating to you now.
We get some big drums. They're really processed with compression, distortion and reverb again, possibly laid with other drum samples, and they're definitely chopped up a lot. These are the first actual drums we've heard in the song, so they have quite a big impact at this point when they're crashing in. There's a really thick, distorted sub-bass underneath these drums, which fills up a whole lot of space in the chorus, and again it makes a big impact because there hasn't really been any strong bass in the song so far. As well as this, there's the banjo from before, some small string samples from Morning again, and some kind of guitar drone, possibly the same post-rock style guitar like in the pre-chorus. All the instrumentation here is really dense and packed together, and this makes the chorus really loud and heavy sounding. The vocals drop out for the second half of the chorus, but more instruments and sounds are introduced to replace them. There's a melody here on what I can only describe as like a synth pluck with reverb, as well as something in the background which just sounds like chopped up random samples of music being played in a room. And I can tell these are chopped up because there's this tiny section here, which you can tell is definitely like chopped and repeated. So at 1:51, the really loud, distorted, overpowering chorus gives way to the most soft, quiet, barest section of the song, which creates a huge juxtaposition in both dynamics and texture here. There's a really soft pad playing one chord, clean guitars playing the same two notes throughout this section, and some light vinyl crackle, which altogether these act as a drone, which doesn't change pitch this entire section. Again, this is contrast to the intense chorus we just heard. It's like time stands still for a minute. This pad holds for a few seconds before a long sample from Morning plays with some vocals and strings.
Here in this room, this narrow room, where life began when we were young, last night.
This sample now feels like it has a completely different mood compared to when we heard it before over the piano and flute earlier in the song. At 2:06, a light piano comes back in, as do the main vocals, which seem a lot softer and more exposed than they did previously in the song. There's one line without harmony and then one with an extra layer underneath it. There's another new pre-chorus section, completely different from before, which starts at 2:20. There's a vocal sample here which sounds like it's been stretched through a granulizer or something, as well as a really sharp sounding acoustic guitar. The piano line from the intro is here as well, only this time the texture has been changed. It's a lot quieter and more distant this time. There's the feedback guitar again, and one vocal line which uses the same vocal effect you can hear on other parts in the album, like in Creeks. Lastly, in this section, there's a background sample which sounds like drums being played on the other end of a room and then high-passed. So for the last chorus section in the song, the drums, sub-bass, piano and guitar drones from the first chorus are all here, but there's no main vocal line this time around. Instead, there's multiple new vocal samples, including the stretched-sounding one from the previous pre-chorus section, the words "Oh My Goodness" sampled from Lonnie Holly All Rendered Truth, and a choir section pitched up with an assfuck of reverb on them. Apparently this choir is from Sharon Van Etten D-sharp G, but I couldn't find a section which sounds like it. The little outro to this song has the pitched up choir from the last chorus, as well as the piano and the sharp sounding acoustic guitar. There's also one last vocal sample, an excerpt from Psalm, I don't know Christian shit, Psalm 22, the words, "Why are you so far from saving me?" This is the only vocal sample in the song which is pitched down rather than up. Okay, so my god, this song has between 22 and a million different sound sources which are all recorded or processed completely differently, but somehow they all come together to form a cohesive sound for this song. The samples pitched up, samples pitched down, pianos recorded in different ways, vocals harmonized naturally and with effects, different kinds of guitar drones, super distorted and gritty textures, and smooth, lush textures. Whew, so I'll probably make more videos about stuff in the album I like pretty soon. There's definitely lots of shit I haven't even begun to touch on here. So I started this video like 3 hours ago. I just wrote 4 pages of shit to talk about and recording it all in the same night. Maybe I'll get it released tonight as well, because it's 8 now. Maybe we can edit it in a couple of hours. I hope you enjoyed it. There's Patreon sample packs if you want to support me. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later, losers.